So here we have the front bodice. Remember, we cut that down into 2 pieces just to make sure we got a better handle of that curved area. So what I did here was I just cut my main fabric, but I also cut my interfacing. And the interfacing that I use, I'm just going to unpin this so you guys can see it. The interfacing that I use is just, and I have it in the notes, it's a shirt interfacing. It's lightweight, but it is fusible, meaning that I'm going to be able to, or have to, fuse this onto my main fabric. So what you have to know is, one, when you're cutting your interfacing, especially when you're using fusibles, you have to make sure that you're cutting. Normally you can fold the fabric over and you would get a sticky side for both patterns, but you have to be careful. Sometimes when we fold it over, we just assume we're going to get symmetrical size, and you realize you just have 2 of the same size. So you always want to make sure that once you're done cutting, that you place those pieces together and make sure that each piece corresponds evenly with the fusible side. So here I have this. I feel for my sticky surface, my rough surface. I look for the main fabric top, which is the right side up, and this is exactly what I want. Sometimes if you're cutting, you accidentally end up with 2 of the sticky sides facing down, and that's not going to work because you need corresponding faces facing up. That way you can glue it together. Now you can actually do it in a block, meaning you just lay out the fabric along with the main fabric and just cut it all out together. What I like to do is I like to cut them out separately. So I'll cut out my main fabric, then I'll go in and cut in my interfacing, only because you just, again, you want to make sure that you're getting the sticky side for all the pieces. You don't want to end up with 2 pieces and the sticky side is facing down, because it doesn't do you any good. Once I'm done and I pretty much feel secure in the fact that all my pieces have corresponding interfacing, that I can feel the sticky surface on this side, and that way I can fuse it to the wrong side of the fabric, then I just go in and individually press each piece together. You want to make sure when you're pressing, you use a pressing cloth, because any exposed edges is going to get stuck to your iron, and then you're going to have to worry about cleaning that iron off, and it almost never all the way comes off, and you always have a bit of a sticky residue. So you want to make sure that you use that pressing cloth just to be sort of like an interference in between the 2. So we're going to go in and press these pieces. Okay, so I have my iron board. My pressing cloth is right in between the iron board. I've laid down my interfacing sticky side up. I've laid my fabric down wrong side facing on the sticky side. I'm just going to put a pin, just a regular pin right at the top, and that way as I'm pressing, it doesn't allow the fabric to move too much. So lay that down. Make sure the iron is nice and hot, and then immediately just go down. And you want to apply just a little bit of pressure, and then just keep going over. Once you feel like things are secure with that initial, you just want to go in. The goal is not to have any bubbles or creases as you're doing this, because whatever creases or bubbles are evident after you pressed it, that's just going to be on the main part of your fabric. So you're just going to have these really weird bubbles and creases, and anybody that has it's going to look weird to everyone, but anybody that has a little bit of sewing knowledge is going to know that somehow, some way, you're either, whether it was in the pressing process or whether it was in you choosing the type of interfacing you use for your garment, they're not compatible, and it's showing this just very unsightly bubbling and bulking of the fabric. So you want to make sure those things are. So the goal is essentially to get this. You can see we went from having a very flimsy sort of fabric to something that was a little bit more supported and durable. So you're going to do that for the bodice, for all the pieces. This is what our interfacing looks like as we've pressed all our pieces of interfacing to the corresponding pieces of our bodice. And as you can see, this is white, and it just shows that this is the back side. I've already begun basting my seams together. I think that's important, especially when you have these multiple layers, and you also want to make sure that the interfacing stays in place as you're running it through the sewing machine. I'm just going to briefly flip it over to the front so you can kind of have an idea. You notice that the bodice is starting to take shape. It's starting to look a little bit more supported and structured, whereas prior to this it was just sort of flimsy fabric. You're starting to notice that it has a little bit more structure to it. So you go to the sewing machine and you're going to then go in and just sew. You can base first. If you feel comfortable, you can just go in and sew all your pieces together, and then we're going to combine our lining to the front of our bodice. So we've pressed out our seams after we've connected everything, run it through the machine. Remember to always press out all of your seams, and also when you're coming around those curves, make sure you do the snips. That way you get some ease out of that curve. So once we've done that part, we're going to flip our bodice back over to the right side. And then we're going to go on to connecting both the lining to the bodice main fabric. So what we do is we take our lining and we want to make sure that the right side of the lining, which is going to be the area where the seams are, nice and closed, and also where your waist stay is, you want to connect that to the right side of the main fabric. So they should kiss. So that way, once you're done basting and sewing around, you will flip it over. You're trying to connect any seams. You always want to go to some of the major seams first, because that's going to give you a nice anchor. So what I'm just going to do is, I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'm just going to go and show you. Remember why it was important that we didn't sew the boning all the way up to the top, because right now, if I was trying to connect these two pieces, there would be a huge piece of boning interfering with that stitch. So you just go to your princess seams and you connect those seams, and you do the same thing for your side seam and all the other corresponding seams. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Videos are uploaded weekly covering dressmaking, fashion, lectures, and more.